Well, before we get into the Premiership chat, the RFU released the findings of their review into England's Six Nations after the pod went out last week. What would you guys make of it? I know you had plenty to say about it on Twitter, Goodey.
Well, let me go first. I'll give you one line. And I love this word. And it makes me sound really regal. Not smoking regal, just regal. He's still in situ. That's the right line, isn't it? Eddie Jones is still in situ for the foreseeable. Quote me, lads. Quote me on that.
Well, I mean, that's the obvious statement, Jim. And he is.
Okay, well, fair enough, yeah.
He was never going to get sacked, was he? Let's be honest. With the credit in the bank from that we still harping on about where he got to the 2019 World Cup final, and the record that he has, and the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic, who knows what the ins and outs are of his contract to get him out of his contract before the end? Can the RFU afford it? Is there anyone else? Everything was saying that Eddie Jones is never going to get sacked, but I was really disappointed with it, to be honest. The review.
Why?
I mean, the first thing they said was the Six Nations was suboptimal. Suboptimal? I mean, if optimal's winning the Six Nations, suboptimal, okay, is it finishing second? It was abysmal. We finished fifth, our worst ever Six Nations.
Fifth's all right. Fifth's all right. It ain't that bad.
They called it suboptimal. And basically, to me, it just read like a list of excuses from everything to do with the initial selection. Some players hadn't played enough, but lots of players had played too much. Our COVID bubble was way more taxing on the players than the rest of the countries. Okay, France went for some ruffles, so rule out the French. Don't worry about the Italians, but the Scots, the Welsh, and the Irish, they had pretty secure bubbles as well. Our breakdown in discipline wasn't good. We must do more leg weights.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm no philosopher, you know what I mean, or a pharmacist, but I'm not working out of that transfers. But who am I to judge? Yeah, I mean that's. Yeah. And who quoted that? Who said that? Is that just like the overall kind of review that's been done, or can we put Eddie Jones' name to that quote?
Well, I greatly believe that Eddie Jones wrote this review himself, to be honest, because not once does any fingers get pointed at Eddie Jones. Every excuse that's come out with, and every reason behind the poor Six Nations is all down to Eddie Jones, whether it be picking the wrong players who haven't played too much, picking players that have played too much, breakdown in discipline, missing a couple of coaches, hiring the coaches that he did coach. Sorry, hiring the coaches that were part of the group. Talking about the Premiership, he hasn't got a relationship with some of the DORs in the Premiership, doesn't speak to a few of them. I can guarantee that for a fact. And I'm just sat there, everything points at Eddie Jones. Just Eddie, put your hand up and go, it wasn't good enough for me. I got these things wrong. There's never a finger pointing at him. So everything's come from the CEO, Bill Sweeney, who's made all the quotes. But to me, it was just a list of excuses that, quite frankly, it raises more questions than answers. And it was, from an England fan reading it, I'm just like, that's embarrassing, some of it. It's cringeworthy, the way it was written. And effectively, it seems like Eddie Jones was absolved of any responsibility or blame, which when you're the top dog and you're making all these decisions, it's basically the can, stops with you. And I just
does that mean you wanted him out, Goodey?
No, I didn't want him out. There's no one out unless you're going to get Scott Robertson or you go and get Rob Baxter. For me, they're the only two people, and I'm trying to think outside the box of other people. To me, they're the only two people that would excite and warrant a change right now, because we are 2 years out from the World Cup. But then the argument with South Africa, they changed their coach 2 weeks before they changed their coach 2 years before the 2019 World Cup and put Rassie and Erasmus in charge, and look what happened. So Rob Baxter doesn't want the job yet. If he does want it in the future, great. He doesn't want it yet. He's on this project at Exeter. He's very comfy where he is. He probably wants it. If he wants the England job, it will be more of a natural progression to an end of a World Cup cycle. So potentially after the next World Cup. But unless the RFU are going to go and get the spuds out and go and get Scott Robertson or someone like that, he was never going to get sacked. And I'm not advocating Eddie should have got the sack. Eddie needs to make massive changes within himself, how he handles the media, how he, doesn't react with players playing well in the Premiership and pick those players. He's bagged the Premiership and said, playing well in the Premiership doesn't equate to being, your form's going to translate into international rugby.
That's the thing. Good.
He goes and watches the Premiership games, but I just don't understand. A lot of the time, he's got his comfy little group, and some serious questions. No one holds him to task. I believe someone needs to be sat above Eddie Jones with rugby IQ to make Eddie report to him, because at the minute he's reporting to a CEO, which, you know, Bill Sweeney could be a very, very good CEO. I'm sure he is, but he's got no rugby IQ in terms of playing the game, understanding what, you know, winning looks like in a rugby environment, international level, you know, succession planning, all the things you want as a Six Nations coach and an England coach. He's got no one to report to that can challenge him.
You need someone with rugby IQ. And now, I'm not being ageist, but if you've got an old fogey, I don't know how old Bill Sweeney is, or someone that's retired 10, 15 years ago. Look at Jason Leonard, for example. Now, legend of a player. He's obviously involved in the British and Irish Lions as well. He's been president of the RFU. But even someone like Jason wouldn't be that unless he's watching the games, reviewing the games, speaking to coaches, analysing matches. Even I find it difficult now, and I watch nearly all the games, and I find it difficult trying to pick out the nuances and pick out who is really on form, the work off the ball, all these things, which would effectively mean that you're the best player in your position and should play for England. So I don't even know, you know, if you've got a CEO or you've got someone like, I don't know, even Martin Johnson now, if he's not watched the game, obviously he managed the England team when he retired. Johnny Wilkinson, chatting to Johnny, he doesn't watch loads of rugby. So who could you put in above Eddie, like, in terms of that could challenge him and say, you need to look at Marcus Smith, because Marcus Smith does that. They'll have a superficial opinion, won't they? Like, and everyone can have a superficial opinion. You know, Bill Sweeney obviously listens to the Rugby Pod, so what we say, we're convincing him. You know, we're convincing him that Sam Simmons or Don Armand back in the day should have been playing for England, or, you know, Alex Don Brandt, when he was playing really well, should be playing for England, or, you know, why is Danny Kerr not playing, or George Ford shouldn't be playing 10. And you could go on. But if Eddie Jones is this super intelligent guy in rugby, which he is clearly, then I don't know how you can challenge him when there is no one in that position that is arguably qualified.
Yeah, the only two people I could really think of that are in and around the area at the minute that they could put someone in there is Conor O'Shea, who's working at the RFU, and he understands environments, winning environments. You know, he understands coaching to a high level. He's got so much experience both playing the game but also coaching at the top level, winning things and understanding what it takes to win, and knowing a lot of the Premiership and how it runs, etc. So he'd be a perfect foil. Or I know Nigel Melville's back in the mix as well with a role there. So there's got to be someone.
I don't know. No, I like Nigel.
I'm not talking. I'm just talking about people that are there now. So, you know, Conor O'Shea is the obvious one, but you need someone in between Eddie Jones and Bill Sweeney, who has rugby IQ that can hold Eddie accountable.